transmission is
Coming to you from deep in the jungles of central Maine. You are about to get high on spirit. Seems appropriate for today's episode that we do partake of a little bit of tobacco, since that's what we're going to be discussing.
If we're going to get into the tobacco, I brought some Nicotina rustica with me here. This is fresh off the plant here. Figured, there's so many different ways to cure tobacco, but this here, I just picked it right off the plant, just like that. Came off, this is bottom leaf right off the plant. Nothing's been done to it.
Wow.
Just like that.
I see that.
Perfect cure.
That's beautiful. This is my first year growing tobacco, so I was wondering about this a lot. I know a lot of it's just going to be learn as you go.
Yeah. I mean, it's a delicate balance in between life and death with tobacco. She's the giver of life, but there's always a price to pay with her.
Okay. Well, elaborate on that, would you?
Well, I mean, that's something that we have seen when you look at it, in her effect upon culture. You look back throughout history and, well, the history that we know of with tobacco, we could start with the Western's influence with tobacco. She was looked upon as a panacea, something that cured everything. That's what panacea means, a cure-all. And as far as they could tell, it did. Like, you put it on a lesion, they had no cure for lupus or any weird skin, like rashes, and they put tobacco on it, and the stuff was healed up in a week, 2 weeks. And, well, I mean, if we look at tobacco itself, it contains lots of different phytochemicals in it. It contains one called Sol. You familiar with
Not
this
heard
one
of
called
that.
Sol? It's amazing that we haven't heard more about this constituent. It's the synthetic precursor to CoQ10.
Okay.
CoQ10 is, as we know, it's involved in the electron transport chain that makes ATP. And
Fascinating. This is very
95% of how the human body makes energy, according to Wikipedia. But nevertheless, that's 7th grade science, that the mitochondria fuels the cell and it needs CoQ10. And the most direct way to make CoQ10 is with Sol. And the most amount of Sol in the environment is in tobacco. The other ways that it can make CoQ10, there's several different precursors, and the notable ones are phenethylamine, which we'll talk about later when we talk about chocolate in particular. The cacti have lots of phenethylamines in them. They're found in grains, though. It's an amino acid that's found throughout nature, but in concentration in the plants that bring about joy. And
Okay.
so
Chocolate, coffee, definitely being...
Yeah. And the Sol and the CoQ10 thing, it is in tobacco smoke. So it's quite possible it plays as a significant role, if maybe more of a significant role than the nicotine.
Well, interesting you should bring up nicotine, because as an aside, this is the first thing that popped into my mind when you began talking about the correlation between, the Sol found in tobacco, which I'd never heard of, and the CoQ10, which is, one of the coenzymes to ATP. And so I've been recently taking a supplement called True Niagen for about the past 3-4 months. And no, it's been about 4 months. I found out about it when I was on retreat in Costa Rica. The guy who founded the retreat center was telling me about it, and it is actually another one of the things that we need along the chain to create ATP. It's a coenzyme to that process as well. It has something to do with the NAD plus piece. And so it actually exists, this, they've sort of patented it in a certain form, right? But it exists, it's found in every cell in our bodies. And the name of it is called nicotinamide riboside. And it has nothing to do with tobacco, although it does share that name, which means there must be some sort of relation to
There
the
is a
nicotine.
relationship there, and
But it is, in fact, really quickly, it's
mhm,
actually related to vitamin B3. They say it's a form of that vitamin
mhm.
that is necessary to create ATP, existing in all our living cells, and just by taking more of it, we may be able to increase the uptake of it and its capacity, its available capacity within our cells. And that's what I've definitely experienced, a continuous increase in clean energy. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Well, we're sponsoring them today. It's called True Niagen. So if you guys want to check them out, they are one of our sponsors, and highly recommend that you look into it. Could be.
I have noticed an interesting charge and much more of the earthy root chakra than other parts of my system. But a noticeable effect, though.
Yes.
And there does seem to be an effect in how fast the body recovers from stresses, sicknesses,
hangovers, things like
physical
that.
workouts.
Yeah, I agree. But back to the plant. I mean,
Yeah.
you mentioned some of the historical uses I hadn't known about as far as general tonic for skin and things. Now, was that the early settlers that found out about that, or did that make its way back to Europe? I mean, I guess it
Oh,
was.
it went back to Europe. No, I mean, it was touted as a panacea in Europe
Hmm.
for a couple hundred
But that would have
years.
been like what, after 1500, right? Because it was
Yeah.
brought back from the Americas.
Yeah, exactly.
I guess they had it in China.
They had it in China too. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, tobacco's found all over the world. Every traditional culture, if you trace it back. Somehow Europe lost it, but Europe lost a lot of plant knowledge. The pharmacratic inquisition, they call it,
Mm.
where we were made to feel bad about anything that connected us to life, it
That
seems like.
connected us to the earth, yes. Or that maybe took away some of the centralization of power from, the church
Yeah,
and the state.
you know,
And that's what, plant medicine is really one of the main tenets at its core is liberation. It's freedom. It's taking the power back for yourself
yeah.
so that you can, empower yourself to become your own healer practitioner. So, but what are some of the other historical uses and benefits that we find with tobacco?
Well, they're countless. It's known throughout the shamanic cultures as something that connects us to the invisibles. It's something that's given as an offering in times of birth, in times of death, in times when there's trouble and you need help from the invisibles, from something that's larger than yourself. Tobacco is something that forms what in my Mayan ancestors call the telectanon, the earth spirit speaking to, is the English translation.
Okay, so it can be a gateway in that respect.
Yeah,
As can any relationship with the plants, as we've talked
yeah.
about before, right? But it does have a particular quality
Yeah,
to
there's
it.
something about the story and the pattern. We'll get into this in much detail later, but how neurotransmitters are this shell, this container of which vibrancy and information can come through. How the story that's being communicated through the plants, yes, it's communicated through these alkaloids, but these alkaloids are not the God. They're no more than something that the spirit can vibrate through.
Right.
Something that opens up a door.
And allows a particular quality of spirit,
Yeah.
right? Or a particular facet. You could say one of the many million faces of the god or goddess to come through, right?
Yeah.
Some of them can be quite, well, they're all very distinct. All of them very distinct. In fact, I was hearing Terrence McKenna talk about this one time. It's like in low doses, and I find this to be true as well. It's like in low doses, there's so much similarity between a lot of these alkaloids, right? Tryptamines and things in particular. But as we increase the dosage, then their character really starts to shine. One that comes to mind is salvia.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I don't want to get too off target, though. So as far as growing your own tobacco, what should people kind of know about that? I mean, you have a lot of experience with that. Like I said, I'm a first-year grower. I was warned by a lot of people that could do damage to the land, but then I researched that. I couldn't find anything really to corroborate it, so long as it's not grown, in an insustainable way where it's over.
No, tobacco is something that, well, the native traditions say. There's lots of stories that have been passed down that were meant for us in this time period. We are the seventh generation after the major holocausts of our first people's ancestors, our ancestors, the first people on this land. Maybe not the first, but that's what we use them as a figure of speech, the First Nations. What were we talking about?
As far as growing it,
Growing it. Well, they say that the spirits come back to the land when the tobacco is planted again. Like the tobacco is planted again and the spirits can come back to the land. And it's been one of my missions, in my travelings, when I was going around to reservations and trying to learn to bring tobacco seed and replant tobacco seed. This leaf here was given to me, the seeds that I grew this leaf were given to me by an archaeologist friend that he said that he got them out of a clay pot. I got them one generation, actually. He gave them to our mutual friend, and she'd grown them out, and she gave me the seed. But they came out of this clay pot that he said that they'd been in the ground for at least 1,000 years.
Wow.
And he sprouted them out, grew more of them. She grew them out, gave them to me, and they've been passed all around. And I have lots of them. I'd like to offer them up at some point as part of a giveaway.
I'm sure one of our listeners or viewers would be very
they grow
happy
these
to receive some of those.
giant
So maybe we'll do a giveaway.
Jurassic leaves. They're huge. And their energy does seem like it is from another time. And I've seen other plants, other tobacco plants, breed with it, so to speak, but it just stomps all over them genetically. Like it stays true to its...
Like a land race.
Yeah, like a land race that has...
It's just so ingrained
it knows
in its way
what
and
it
so
is.
strong,
Yeah.
So it doesn't get influenced very much by others. It's like, I'm the influencer.
Yeah. It's pretty neat like that. I wanted to go back to the soul and soul thing. I looked down at my notes a little bit here.
Okay, well, yeah, tell us more. That's very intriguing.
Soul and soul, it plays a major role in how tobacco deals with stress. Well, they've noticed a 7-fold increase in tobacco in the soul and soul when it's affected by tobacco mosaic virus. You could assume that a similar thing would happen when it comes in contact with any virus. Its soul and soul levels go way up. And a 6-fold increase in when it deals with heat stress. So in the patternings of nature, we all know how humans use tobacco to regulate themselves from stress. And we often associate this as just with the nicotine. But the soul and soul does come through in the tobacco smoke. And it is a precursor to how we make CoQ10, how we balance ourselves. And it regulates all these different functions in our body that help us have more of a stable feeling.
Seems like it functions somewhat as like a neurotransmitter from the way you're describing it.
That's possible. I mean, the nicotine is called more of the neurotransmitter, but all these things, they play so many roles, so I don't know. It's very possible. It's used in a pharmaceutical sense as a antimicrobial, as an anti-tumor, as an anti-inflammatory, and as an anti-ulcer. This is the soul and soul we're talking about.
Right.
It's an intermediate in the precursor in synthesizing vitamin K2.
So that's one word, right? It's Solinsol. Is that Solinsol?
Solen
En.
Sol.
Sol. Okay. Solinsol.
I was going to move on to nicotine here a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
It's considered a pyrene alkaloid. We'll talk about that later. But the pyrene ring, when Gaia learned how to make the pyrene ring, that enabled a whole bunch of other things to happen. That's when photosynthesis happened. And so this plays an important role in these native stories and science, and how they say tobacco was the first plant. You plant tobacco first, you plant the corn in a spiral around the tobacco. Now, the nicotine is also part of the Harmala family alkaloids. Same as ayahuasca, Syrian rue, and the Harmala family was originally called telepathyne.
Interesting.
Before it was rebranded as Harmala.
Yeah, right. And all the associated alkaloids, harmaline, harmine, and others.
Originally they were called telepathine and the telepathine family alkaloids, which was probably a lot closer to their actual biological function.
I'm quite confident that that's probably linked to the fact that it has a way of influencing the brain waves to produce more, say, theta waves, where where you go into a trance state more so, or a lot of times when massive recorded psychokinesis and ESP and things have been registered, they coincide with a spike in theta and also in gamma waves in the brain.
Yeah, no, nicotine and then the nicotinic receptor sites and the acetylcholine is the gateway into that. But the nicotinic receptor sites, there is a relationship with deep theta wave, connection with the cosmic serpent, as Jeremy Narby points out in his book, where he says that you can actually externalize your genetic structure and look at it through high dose tobacco ingestion. Not recommending anyone do that. It's a very interesting phenomenon that happens in the jungle, though, through song. There's an invocation of the vocal cords with the tobacco, that there's a trance and something that is seen in between the practitioner and the one that's being worked on. And that is used in the healing.
Well, one of the things that I've noticed recently, especially as I've really been intending and more conscious of my connection with Gaia, right? And we'll have a whole conversation about this further, but just in the way that, she manifests herself, right? Through all plants, through basically everything that I encounter. And so every time I, am imbibing, let's say if I imbibe tobacco, there's an opportunity in that moment, right? I can just do it as I can do it as an escape. I can run outside, and for a quick cigarette on my lunch break because, to relieve the stress and things. But no matter, or, I could be, enjoying it in many forms, but no matter what, there's an opportunity there to connect, right? And this is with anything we do, with food, etc., right? So, but if we bring that sense of heightened awareness of what's actually happening in that moment, right, which to me is I'm actually connecting with the spirit of this plant, right, which is the spirit of Gaia, right, in this form, and that is my interconnectivity with the all, with everyone, with everything. And so there's an opportunity for gratitude and connection, respect and appreciation. In addition to all the other benefits that go along with it, but it's a way of ritualizing that aspect to deepen it.
The elders, I should say, when they talk about the pipe, the peace pipe, it's a reflection of our body and the heart, and the stem being the spine. It's like the tobacco's going right to the heart for all relations.
Interesting that they used to say that it soothed the heart in Western medicine.
Well, I mean, soul and soul and
claim.
CoQ10 is...
And there certainly is a way, but there's, okay, so like you were saying, there's a double-edged sword with tobacco too, right?
Mm-hmm.
We should probably talk about that a bit. I personally don't smoke cigarettes anymore, but I did. And when I smoked commercial cigarettes regularly, the effects were extremely deleterious over time, and it was very, very difficult for me to put down. It took me years to be able to break that habit.
Part of that has to do with that they freebase the nicotine. They soak it in a high base solution. Even American Spirit does. They say it's organic and they say there's not additives, but look it up. Look it up. They freebase it. And so, yeah, it's not added, but nicotine in its acid form, the form that it grows in the plant, I haven't noticed it to be addictive. I could be wrong, but I've smoked a lot of it. And I was told early on, before I ever smoked tobacco, by the Swami, just notice it going into your lungs. Really notice it going all the way through. And if you smoke, you're going to smoke what you need and not more.
So it's bringing that heightened body awareness and consciousness to it as well. And that's a healthy respect, as well as a way of heightening the experience and bringing a meditative mind to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and giving it a place to go. Like when you start smoking more of these stronger tobaccos, like these rusticas, they contain over 15% nicotine at times. So if you're not clear about what you're doing with it, people are going to get the wobbles. You're going to get the sweats, you might puke, all kinds of disturbances on your way in, because she wants you to come with clarity. She wants you to come with respect. And she's going to clean out the parts of you that aren't in alignment.
Fascinating.
And the cleaning is a good thing, and it's something to be welcomed.
Well, I did notice, man, there was a recent time when I got up one morning, I was sitting with my coffee, maybe 20 minutes after I got up, and I had a little roach of a blunt from some nice Connecticut Fronto that I had purchased online. And I just lit it up and I took a few puffs off of it, but I went into a trance. It was powerful. It was more powerful than I remember, when I used to, as a teenager, wake up in the morning and smoke a Newport, get a sort of a head rush. But this put me into a deep trance. It was like I was almost incapacitated, but it was actually very nice as well, because it allowed me to really settle and not just rush into my day, as we have a tendency to do sometimes, pick up the cell phone, answer the email, look at the messages, and, the mind just starts running. Next thing you know, we're caught in the middle of it. So that little bit of entrancement was fantastic, but it showed me the power that was within it as well, and again brought about that sense of respect. It's like, wow, you can't just take this lightly.
It's a great topical medicine. Any kind of bee sting or rash, poison ivy.
Now, how would you do that? Would you just wet it and rub it on?
Yeah, I mean, depending on people's comfortabilities, I would chew it up and then apply it, and then apply a fresh leaf on top of that.
Okay, cool. So we'll figure that out.
Yeah, figure it out.
That'll be in
later.
the works.
Yeah.
And people can look forward to that. Also, if you guys are interested in that sounds like something that you want to learn more about and you have questions about, be sure to drop the questions, in the comments. Reach out to us.
Yeah. And tobacco, I mean, you can definitely, well, I'll save that for, later. So I was thinking about the dangers, it's like, it's definitely immense caution.
Well, yeah, go ahead. Talk about that for
Yeah.
a little bit.
You can hurt yourself with tobacco. When I was down in the jungle, I showed up at this one guy's place, Luis Roca. He was a famous shaman. He traveled all around Europe. And we showed up in a group of 10 or 12 people. And he fed us a thick tobacco juice our first morning there after we stayed the night. Oh, did I get sick. So sick. Puked that whole day. But it seemed like there was a natural balance inside the tobacco plant where I was just going to puke it up. Like there was an underlying presence there.
Okay.
But again, there is immense caution and respect. She is a deadly plant.
That's true.
She is.
Yes, we know this, right? People have died with the vape juice
Yeah.
in certain ways.
But
So I've
taken
heard.
with respect and in small amounts, she is a giver of life. She feeds us in ways that no other plant can. And the antibacterial properties are something that our native ancestors have looked at. Science should look at in terms of going after these bacteria that they can't kill with antibiotics, because the tobacco can in lots of situations. It's a very strong plant when other plants have failed.
Well, how about using tobacco in coincidence with other plants?
In coincidence or in combination?
Yeah, in combination.
Well, definitely in the jungle, tobacco is always used in combination with all the plants. Like when I was working with this one friend, he was an elder of the village that I stay in there, and he saw that I was chewing coca leaves. He was really interested. He gave me a big smirk. He was like, "Oh," he's like, you come to ceremony tonight. You have me in your maloka tonight, and I sing you the song that opens you to the coca plant." So after we drank medicine, drinking ayahuasca, and he sang me the song. And there was a definite opening to the world of light. And he was like, "Here, now smoke this mapacho, big cigar." He says, "This is what makes it so the song takes hold, so the medicine takes hold,
Absolutely.
so it stays there." So
Well, that's definitely my experience, as I know it is yours in our retreats as well. When we do sound baths and we sing songs on our retreats, there's a tremendous empowerment and an opening that takes place. And the capacity for an influx of healing energy and power can come through. And also information, like, here we go again. Information from, our ancestors, from other planes of reality and dimensions we have access to through these sounds.
yeah,
We may not understand the words, but the vibrations hit us and they transform us from within. This is the power also, that is within chanting.
yeah,
It's done in all traditions.
yeah. Tobacco as a gateway to glossolalia and deep theta communications, a way of invoking these spirits that come through the deep. Yeah. Yeah, tobacco is something that's given to all plants in building relations. So in that sense, it is combined with all medicines and in small amounts.
When we took ayahuasca, that was our initiation into it. We all prepared tobacco and had a sacred smoke.
Yeah,
That definitely seemed to set a tone for what was to come.
yeah, and as you're rolling that smoke, you're rolling your prayers.
Contemplating your intention.
Yeah, into that. Shall we smoke our...
I think we should. I would love to. That's from the 1,000-year-old seed, at least, that was recovered in a clay pot and then regrown and seeded.
And this is fresh, right off the plant in my bedroom.
Right off the plant. Incredible. You seeing this, Joshy? So we know how to harvest it.
And the tobacco smoke, there's something that really can't be explained, but you could feel things in your field, you know, a little tension in here in me, like I feel it, maybe you could see it there. You put the tobacco there. It's like something's changed in there. The shoulder loosens, the muscles loosen. It's like the medicine doesn't necessarily have to be ingested. Like a proximity, there's an absorption through proximity and through intention that happens.
Certainly, just like with sage and
Palo Santo.
Palo Santo. The san is in Santo. Yeah. Santo is saint, as well as San Pedro. The san in San Pedro is also for Saint Padre.
I'd like to offer up prayers that anyone watching or listening finds good relationships with tobacco, finds right relationships with tobacco. Lets go of any of their negative views, you know, lets go of any of their negative habits or attachments to tobacco. Yeah, it does connect us to a thing that relieves stress and connects us to visions of health. I'd like to implant that thought, that vision into people's relationship with tobacco.
Thank you. That's beautiful, man. I remember when we were first talking about doing this episode, I felt there was going to be some controversy because there's such a stigma around tobacco use, right? Because of the way it's been commercialized and because of the death that it's caused, people's use in that way, and also the tremendous addiction and waste of money and disempowerment that people have around it. That's certainly something to be noted, right? And we've sort of lived through that phase a lot, and many of us have freed ourselves from that dependency and addiction, but a lot of us are still caught in the midst. So there certainly is that stigma. And, you know, we don't want to promote it, right, in that way, in any way, other than to use it responsibly and in a healthy fashion, and one that takes into consideration tremendous respect for its capacities towards the light as well as the darkness.
Yeah. They say that the colonies may not have existed if it wasn't for the cash crop of tobacco. It was the main moneymaker. There was a reason why they kept bringing all those slaves over and people kept coming over. Huge tons and tons and tons and tons, boatloads and boatloads of tobacco shipped back to Europe. Amassed major amounts of wealth. And then a lot of that wealth, you know, that was a big part of what the Revolutionary War was about. You know, it was like, all this tobacco is getting sent over there, we're not getting paid for it. And the big tobacco farmers, George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and the rest of them, they were like, well, I think we just better just keep this stuff to ourselves over here, you know? Like, I don't know if we need to be crossing the ocean anymore for distribution.
Let's make our value known, right, and demonstrate it. So there's quite a bit of a legacy to this plant as well in our American history.
Yeah.
Beyond just the native use of it, right?
Yeah.
But the colonial
early and for the natives,
settlers.
It's life. It's a connection to story, it's a connection to the past, it's a connection to the future. Whenever I would sit down and talk story, with a native elder, it always started off with tobacco, whether it was some tobacco that I'd grown and given to them, or whether they were just smoking a cigarette. The smoke was in the air, and the stories came through that. Whenever I want to know anything about what's going on with the medicine in the jungle, those guys always smoke tobacco first. And it seems to mitigate something with spirit. There's a calming force. There's a settling force, a grounding force. The roots of the tobacco are so fine, possibly the most fine of any, fine being like delicate, of any other plant. They go out in so many directions, the feelers, the hairs that go out into the environment and feel the surroundings. And the trichromes that come off the plant, very beautiful, right? Off the leaves, off the flowers, off the buds. They produce huge amounts of alkaloids, nicotine, nicotinic acid, so forth. That, yeah, there is a insecticidal quality there, but if you look at it from light, from aura, there's a transmission of light that's going on. It's a crystalline structure that's forming right on the leaves, right on the outer part of the leaf, on the outer part of the whole plant. Anytime that there's that much concentration of information in a crystalline matrix, there's something special going on.
Not unlike in cannabis.
Very similar.
Well, my friend, this has been a pleasure. A great conversation. There's certainly a lot more to go into.
Yeah.
Concerning this
possibly
topic.
We'll go into some preparations later. Really interested in showing you about the concentrated, it's almost like a sludge. You cook it down with some other herbs in it, some ash, and you make this paste. Just eat like a little tiny bit of it. So grounding, so soothing. It's a very nice way to get your CoQ10 supplement rather than having to get it from a pharmaceutical company. Something you can make yourself.
As well as your connection to the earth, to Gaia, and to all life.
Yeah.
Well, thank you again. Thank you guys for watching.
Till next time.
This has been High on Spirit.
This transmission is coming to you from deep in the jungles of central Maine.